I'm Ashley Easter.
And I'm Charlie Grantham, and you're listening to Serendipity,
the podcast where we explore everyday magic all around us.
Hi, welcome back to Serendipity. I'm Charlie, and Ashley is here too. We are really excited because today's topic is all about accessing your higher self. So what is your higher self, how to access it, just all around, all about the higher self. So I'm really excited. I think we should probably start by defining what is the higher self. So Ashley, can you kind of define what does that mean when people refer to their higher selves?
Yeah, so I've been wanting to talk about this because I had some questions about it on my Instagram page, and I was like, I feel like people hear the term higher self all the time. Like if you're in anything, any semblance of spiritual Instagram, people are talking about talking to their higher self, channeling their higher self, all those things. And I think that there's a misconception about what it is, and that it's just kind of something people say, but they don't really have a lot of information about it, so it feels kind of mysterious. So what I see as the higher self is basically it is your intuition. I see intuition as really this energy that you have within you to connect you to information that's going to help you for your life. And we've talked about in other episodes how there's 4 main ways your intuition shows out for you: through seeing, hearing, feeling, and knowing. And it's an energy, and it picks up on information on an energy level that your body can then read, and then shows up in those 4 ways. But I think for a lot of people, just connecting with your intuition when you know it's just this energy, it feels like such an abstract concept that it's hard to really have a relationship with it. It's how do you have a relationship with energy? Because
Yeah.
it's energy, So how I view the higher self is that it is your intuition personified. And basically, it is coming up with an image in your mind that represents your intuition, so you can then have conversations with your intuition. I think sometimes people do this and they say it's their spirit guides or angels or things like that. But I really personally, I think all of that is actually coming from your intuition. But it's so much easier to have a picture in your mind of what your intuition looks like. So if you can pretend it's a person, then it's easier to ask questions to a person than just some random vibrations and energy.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I feel I totally agree. It's easier to have some type of image in your head. And I think that's why sometimes people feel maybe God is speaking to them, because that's something they can, actually say in their mind, whatever they think God looks like.
Right.
Or a saint appearing. I think we talked kind of about collective consciousness, but people feeling they got a visit from a saint or something, and they told them something. Or even I'm thinking about children who have imaginary friends, and
Yes.
I think I've heard sometimes children have those as a way of expressing their emotions and things. And so it's almost, it's an easier way if we can kind of create an image of something. And I like your definition, because I feel when I was thinking about the higher self, when you came up with the idea for the episode, I was kind of almost more of thinking what is the higher self not? And I think sometimes it can be marketed as oh, this thing to improve towards or something. And I don't agree with that. And I don't think that's what you're saying, Ashley. It's more of it's something you already have within you. And this is just a way to kind of access it more clearly. And I saw something, and I I'll try to find it. I think I lost it, but on Twitter, if anybody knows what I'm talking about, send it to me. But someone posted that their therapist told them that like therapy is not um the goal is not to become a better version of yourself, it's to become a clearer version of yourself.
Ooh, yes.
And I love that because you're already fine, like just how you are. Like you're already whole, like you are like loved and valuable, like exactly how you are. There's nothing that you need to like work towards. Like you can like improve, like, you know, want to improve certain areas of your life, but you don't have to be like, oh, if I do this, then I'll be good enough. Or, you know, you're good exactly how you are. And I think some of that comes from like just the idea, like growing up in Christianity, a lot of times kids are told like everyone's bad, you're bad, like babies are bad, like the second you are born, you are bad. And the only way to like not be bad is to like do these things or like accept Jesus or whatever. And it's like working towards something. I feel like that's such like a capitalist thing,
Yeah.
to feel like you're always like it's like the system wants you to feel like you're lacking something so that they can profit off of you, and that's not what we're saying here. Like you are totally um you know, you're totally good and perfect just the way you are, but your higher self is more like what Ashley said. It's to access your your intuition personified, and kind of like I think that's how I view it. It's just like a clearer version of myself without the like muddying of like different things like stress or
Ego.
trauma or
Yeah,
yeah.
anxiety. Yeah,
So
yeah.
I just wanted to make that distinction because I think it like, can you tell it aggravates me when people are like, oh, like your higher self is
Yeah.
like your better self. It's like, no, no, no. Like,
Yeah. No, I think that makes a lot of sense, and I think it is really good to have that distinction. Um, because like you said, we are all whole as we are, and it's not so much getting better. It's just like you said, getting clearer, and
yeah,
I hope we can find that Instagram or that tweet,
yes.
because that sounds really really good. The other thing is, the reason I personally, and I'm not projecting this on other people because I know everybody has their own individual relationship with their intuition and things they resonate with, but I prefer to personify and envision my intuition as my higher self rather than an angel or a spirit guide. Personally, I'm not saying it's wrong for other people to do that, but I like to do it as my higher self because it reminds me that it's coming from me, that it is a part of
Mhm.
me already versus
Yeah.
something that's outside of me. Like, I believe intuition can take information from outside, but intuition itself is like a part of you. And
Mhm.
so I personally like to use the image of higher self as like kind of what you were saying, like the clearest version
Mhm.
of me, who has access to all of that information via intuition without the ego and the stress and the anxiety coming in. And sometimes I fear, and again, I'm not shaming other people for having different types of relationships with intuition and, you know, their belief systems, but sometimes I fear that when people say that they have like spirit guides and angels, sometimes I fear that they are giving power to entities or perceived entities outside of themselves versus remembering that like this wisdom is actually in you,
Mhm.
and you don't have to have something outside of yourself to like validate your goodness, to give you guidance and direction. And you
Mhm.
might pull information from outside sources, but like it's your intuition, or intuition personified as higher self, that is like a part of you. Um, so
Yeah.
that's really why I resonate with that over like angels or spirit guides. Because I really believe in people being in their own power versus like relying on some outside entity or perceived entity.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I feel like that, I think we'll probably get into it, I think some in our next episode. Um, because I think what happens, I think what you're kind of saying is, I think there can be more of an opportunity if you're giving power to something external to you,
Mm,
for manipulation
yeah.
and abuse and, things like that so often happen within organized religion. Um, because then, like if your intuition, if you're like seeing that as like God, maybe
Mm-hmm.
sometimes like there's people like in positions of power who will use that, the whole like beliefs that you have, the very like sincere beliefs that you hold, to like manipulate you and to use that against you. And so I totally agree. Again, like people can do whatever they want, but I think it's just something to be aware of and conscious of, that
Right.
there are often a lot of people, that seek out those positions of power within organized religions to manipulate that, because they know, that oftentimes people they hold very sincere beliefs, and their faith carries them through a lot, and so then they take advantage of that. And so anyway, that I totally agree. That's just me saying I agree.
No, that makes sense, and I think you bring up really good points. What it kind of reminds me of is like whether you say it's a particular archangel or a spirit guide or something like that, a lot of times there's already a lot of ideas about angels or particular archangels or lore
Mhm.
about particular spirit guides, those types of things. And so, because there's these external ideas, it might be limiting to your intuition because you're kind of putting it in a box,
Mhm.
versus I think higher self is so individualized that my higher self is going to be completely different from yours. My intuition is going to be completely different from yours. And I mean, they both come from a place of love and expansion, but the way it shows up and the way like it's not in a box of like what other people have already said, okay, this archangel has these qualities. And I understand and I respect people who really connect with those types of energies. um but for me, coming from a background, like you said, of religion where it was just like everything fits in this tidy little box,
Mhm.
and I think for myself, it feels like there's a lot less room for manipulation when I know it's coming
Yeah.
from me versus like an archetype of a different thing that other people have already put their ideas into.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that isn't useful, but just for myself, that's kind of why I've settled on really connecting with higher self.
Yeah.
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 I'm
So how do
curious.
you access it? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, yeah. No, well, I before we talk about accessing, I wondered if you had like, do you have a vision in your mind of what your higher self looks like? Do you do that at all? 'Cause I have a vision in my
Um,
mind, but I didn't know if you like already have one or not. Either one is fine. I was just curious.
that's a good question. I kind of see, this is gonna sound funny. I feel like sometimes if I like picture it, the first thing that comes to my mind is me, but glowing. Like I'm just glowing.
Yeah.
Like I have light and I'm glowing and I look happy. Like, yeah, that's just like the first thing that comes to my mind. So I definitely do think of my higher self as literally just like me,
Hmm.
glowing. Like I feel like maybe that was my higher self singing in our last episode when I talked about like the
Yeah.
concert. Maybe that, I kind of like picture myself kind of glowing in that. So I definitely see myself when I think of my higher self.
I love that. No, I
What
think
about you?
that's really beautiful. For me, it's similar. I do in my imaginations of my higher self, I do see like a woman who is has blonde hair, and I have started coloring my hair to kind of fit the image of my higher self that I have in my mind. And it's usually longer hair though, so I haven't gone to that extent yet. But maybe we'll see. But yes, also like that kind of glowing and like the skin just looks really clean and fresh. And I think also it feels like an energy to me of like just complete calm and um, I guess just like satisfaction.
Hmm.
There's another word I'm trying to, contentment in
Content.
life.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I feel like when I access that and I have conversations with my higher self, which we'll, talk about in a minute, she's coming from, like you said, kind of a version of me, but a version of me that I aspire to a degree, but also not because I think there's something wrong with me now, but just like stripped down the anxiety, like that's not there.
Like the clear version, like
Yes.
just, yeah, without all the things muddying,
Mhm.
the
Yeah.
vision.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Um, I didn't say that, but yeah, that is, like you said, kind of what I was kind of feeling, like this contentment. Like when I said happiness, that's kind of like just a content, just like you said, without the anxieties, without whatever. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. But back to what you asked about, how do you connect with your higher self? Um, I can share how I connect with my higher self and some of the work that I do with my clients, coaching clients. And then, if you have ways that you do, Charlie, I would love to hear that. But basically, again, remembering that it's just your intuition and it's you kind of imagining an image of what your intuition looks like. I think the first time that I met my higher self was in a visualization meditation. So, not the kind of meditation where you're just like sitting and going, and, trying to like block out everything from your mind, but more like the journey type meditation where it's bringing you. And the first one that I did was a visualization where it was actually like you're going to meet your higher self, and then it asks like, what does she look like, or what do they look like, what qualities, and kind of really zooming in on the presence of what my higher self was like. And those things came really naturally to me. It wasn't stuff that I had to think about hard because I was in a meditative state. Like it just popped into my mind. And I just, when it was like, imagine your higher self in front of you, it was like, oh my God, I see her now. And then, what does it feel like? And I tuned in and I felt what it felt like. And then, kind of from that point, I've kept that image. I've allowed it to like shift and change if it needs to, but it's stayed basically the same. And so what I do is I do a lot of those visualization meditations, and I'll actually have a conversation. So I'll either do this with a guided meditation that I've made myself. I do a lot of guided meditations for my clients with this, but I will literally ask a question while I'm in meditation. I'll ask that question to my higher self, and then I will like be quiet and see what comes up. And it's amazing the stuff that she says. And you can do this without like the visualization of your higher self, but I think it's so much like it's hard to focus your energy and like have that expectance when you're just envisioning like something abstract. But to actually have that concrete image in my mind, and I'll ask her like, what do I need to know today? And then I'll pause, and like the first word or sentence or image that comes to my mind, will be like, oh my gosh, that's a word for my higher self, for my intuition. And then I'll ask another question and I'll pause. And I actually do this thing where I do like higher self coaching sessions. Basically, like after I've met my higher self, I will get into a meditative state, and I'll sometimes have like a little book to write things down. And I'll just be like, okay, this is a problem I'm facing, like what do I need to know, what am I missing? And just asking open-ended questions like that and seeing what comes up. And it just like opens the floodgates to my intuition. And just one other side thing, like I've actually asked to go to my higher self's house, which I believe is like a version of my future home that I'm manifesting in like a tropical location, and just seeing like where they place the artwork and how the setup and layout of the kitchen is. And it's like another way of manifesting and envisioning what you want, but it's all coming from your intuition. And you're just like directing your questions towards intuition, but putting a face to it. And so that's kind of how I have interacted with my higher self, mainly through questions and visualization meditations. And I found that has really, like, I'm always shocked what comes up because I'm like, I didn't try to think of that answer myself. Like, it
Yeah.
definitely came from my subconscious, from my intuition. Like, this is stuff that I did not expect. And even when
Hmm.
I'm writing, like, sometimes the sentences that I'll get, I'm like, I would not structure a sentence that way. Like, that
Wow.
looks really different. So that's kind of how I connect with my higher self. Charlie, do you connect with your higher self? Have you tried that, or how is that for you?
Well, I really like that because I like how structured it is. And also, it's kind of just like if you were talking to like another person, like a friend,
Yeah.
a therapist, like someone you trust, so I feel like that's a really cool way to do it. And I love that you pictured your higher self's house. Like I never thought of that. That's like so cool. Now I kind of want to do that um, and see like how I do kind of like I wonder if it's similar. Like sometimes I dream about like I wonder like where we're gonna live. Like because Nate and I are very um we know we should settle down somewhere because we do want a community that we have like for like long term, but we're always like, okay, let's move somewhere else, let's do something else.
Uh-huh.
And so sometimes I think, well, I wonder what it would be like if we ever finally buy a house, like what would it look like? And it always looks the same. And I like maybe that is like also like my intuition and like my higher self, like
Mm.
I just never connected it the way that you are. And I think that's really cool, especially to like talk it out like you're talking to a friend. I mean, like it's very similar. It really reminds me of like therapy because I mean, people pay like a lot of money just to like
Yeah.
talk to a therapist and like you're doing that with your higher self for free. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's really
Quick
cool.
question about that. Like with the image, is it like I can't remember. I think, are you a specific or non-specific manifestor? I know we talked about that in the human design episode.
I'm a specific
Okay. Okay.
manifestor. Yeah, both
Yeah.
Nate and I are. So we have
Okay.
like lots of specifics going on over
Yeah.
here.
Because I'm curious
Um,
about that too. Like in your vision of your house, is it super specific? Because I have like three specific items in mine, but it's more an overall feeling. And I feel like I'd be open to it as long as I have those three specific things. A lot of the rest of that, it doesn't matter as long as it matches like the feeling that's coming from it. I'm wondering if yours is like really precise.
I mean, mine does have a feeling, but mine is actually more about like what I see in my head. And I think Nate has like the same. I guess we've never talked about it, but every time we point at a house, it's always like the house. Like I think we have the same taste.
Yeah.
Um, but it's an older house. It's a white house and it's an older house that we've kind of renovated but kept a lot of like the like charming like original features, like
Ooh.
whether that be like the floor usually is like the original floors that we've just um like renovated, and then there's a porch. And I don't necessarily see like a big yard because
Mhm.
I don't really necessarily care about that, but there's always like a ton of plants and like flowers and stuff in the yard, or in the house specifically. There's always like a gold ornate frame, like picture
Mm.
frame in the house. There's always like lots of windows with curtains that are like the sheer white curtains. This stuff I don't even have. Actually, I don't have a gold ornate frame. I love them, but I don't have them. I don't have
Yeah.
sheer white curtains. So it's stuff I don't, and I don't have a ton of plants because, as I've probably think I've talked about it before on the podcast, like Winston eats everything. So I'm like slowly trying to build my plant collection. But
Yes.
yeah, it's like always kind of like that. And Nate even said something the other day, because we don't talk about it a ton because like we're not anywhere near buying a house, but he did mention he was like, do you ever think like of us like buying a house, and like what house do you think of? But he was like, because I think of like an old house that we renovate but not too much, where we like basically the same thing I said. And it's
Mm.
funny because we watch a lot of like home reno shows. That's like our
Yeah.
mind numbing like
Yeah. Yeah.
activity. And so I said something, I was like, yeah, like we're definitely would renovate it but keep a lot of its charm. And Nate was like, yeah, but we're not gonna like take down walls. I'm like, well, if we have to take down a wall, we'll take down a wall. He was like, but it can't be a load bearing wall. And I'm like, just get out of here. Like obviously, like he's like all
Oh
because it's
my
always like
God.
a thing on like the Property Brothers where it's
That's
like, okay, we'll
hilarious.
have to see if this is a load bearing wall because that's gonna cost $5,000 to run a beam. And I'm like, Nate, you're getting ahead of yourself. Okay. Um, but yeah, that's usually what I think about. And it's funny because Nate, and that really could just be because like we do have almost like the same taste in like everything.
Yeah.
So I mean, we are married. So like, there's a reason we got
Works out.
married. Like we're very similar. But yeah, that's usually what I'm picturing. And it's funny because I've always wanted to live in New England. Like since I was a kid, I had like, I don't really have a reason specifically, but since I was a kid and we finally do, and it's like a dream come true. And that what I'm describing is a very like New England style
Mm.
of a house. And I've always like wanted that type of house, and I've always pictured that type of house. So yeah, it's kind of interesting. I'm glad I've never really like thought in depth about this, and now I'm like really like thinking about it. Like maybe I should make a vision board.
Yeah, no, that's so cool. At the very least, a Pinterest board, but yeah, like
Right.
a vision board would be awesome. Yeah, yeah, that's really cool. But as far as like, um, when, in our last episode, you talked about kind of, um, how you were singing at that concert and how it just kind of felt like you were kind of taken over, and you mentioned sort of like maybe that was your higher self. Like, have you had other situations where you feel like you've asked questions of your higher self, or your higher self came through, or you got like a clear image of like, this would be me, or this is me, with the other things stripped away that are like clouding who I am? You have anything like that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know if you can hear, but we have a cat back here screaming. Daisy's here snoring. So if you hear
I can't hear
snoring,
the
I mean, like,
snoring. No.
ridiculous. Frankie's walking around, you can hear his pitter patter. I'm just like, today it's like this is a zoo. Like this is an actual zoo. But anyway, yeah, I mean, I don't think I've ever actually like sat down and was like, okay, I'm gonna like talk to my higher self, or I'm gonna like picture my higher self. Um, I kind of I talk to myself a lot. Like
Mm.
if I'm by myself, generally I'm gonna be like talking to myself. I know that makes me sound like whatever, but
No, no.
I do. Like I love looking in the mirror and if I have like something I'm thinking about, I do that a lot with like class projects or work problems, not even just rehearsing something, but if I'm like trying to think out a problem or an idea, I will just look
Yeah.
in the mirror and talk to myself. So it is similar to almost how you're closing your eyes and picturing, and like
Mm.
asking questions and talking. I'm more of like having a conversation with myself.
Did you
And I've
know
done
there's a
that.
name for that?
No.
It's
Is
called
it a
mirror work.
diagnosable thing?
No, no, it's
Oh,
called mirror work. It's like a big
oh, okay.
self-development tool. Yeah, it's
I've
called
done that
mirror
since I
work.
was a kid. I mean, like I
Yeah.
would be, and maybe that started, I talk about being homeschooled. Maybe that started when I was homeschooled because I definitely did it then. And maybe it was just like, okay, I need to talk to somebody near to me. Like there's
Right.
my classmate here, like, I don't know. So yeah. Oh, that's cool. I'm going to have to look that up because I do it a lot. Like I love,
Yeah. And mirrors
talking.
are like, especially in like the magic community, mirrors are seen as like portals to other worlds and things. And like,
Hmm.
I think maybe I'm not pronouncing this wrong, but like skyring, sort of like when people look into black mirrors and things, and
Oh,
also when people look into like crystal balls or a bowl of water.
uh-huh.
But they're supposed to, according to the ideology and like different magic communities, is that like there is really a lot of power in um, mirrors, and that they're like portals. But also in the self-development community, which is separate but sometimes there's overlaps, there's just this idea of like talking to yourself in the mirror, and like um, it really is kind of like a version of your higher self, and you can have like conversations back and forth even though you're the only
Yeah.
one talking. And so I think that's really cool. And also that like you didn't learn that someplace, like you just naturally did it. And like communities have been using that for a long time. So yeah,
That's
it's
so
not like a diagnosable
interesting.
thing. It's actually like a self-development tool, and or something accepted in like the magic community. So yeah.
Yeah, I definitely have heard of things where it's like I think like scientists end up like labeling something and naming something, but I think a lot of times they're labeling something that like people already know. Like a lot of the times it's not as so much as like, oh, scientists hold this information. People do, and scientists are able to say like, okay, this is what this is. We're gonna name it. We're gonna describe this phenomenon or whatever. So I've definitely heard of that because I also did I was talking to one of the professors where I work, and I was like telling him how I like I will listen to, like, if I find a song, I'll pick a song for like a moment in my life, whether it's like a
Uh-huh.
season. So like for each season, I'll pick a song, or if it's like, it sounds like gruesome, but like even for like if I'm going to a funeral, I'm like flying or
Yeah.
driving there, I'm like, this is the song for this
Yeah.
memory.
Yeah.
And then that like song will take me back to that
Mhm.
memory. Or like if I want to feel a certain way, I'll listen to a song. And he was like, oh, that's called mood management. And I was like, oh,
Yeah.
I didn't know this was
Yeah.
a thing. Like, so I think it's like that people probably are doing these things without knowing, and scientists just observe it and are like, oh, interesting. Like, we're gonna name this and we're gonna like, see how it works. And I just think animals and humans are animals are just fascinating like that. Like we just do
Yeah.
things like it's just like our brains, like the way that like I don't know, like a squirrel knows how to bury its nuts. Like humans have stuff like that that we're not
Right.
even fully aware of that we
Yes.
do. I'm getting off track here, but I think that's really cool. But yeah, I feel like that's one way that I kind of access my higher self. And I don't necessarily think of it that way, but now I am kind of thinking of it that way.
Mhm.
And then also I think, especially, I'm thinking about it right now. In our last episode, you kind of suggested that that story of me like getting on the stage and singing, that I was probably in a flow state. And I was like,
Yeah.
yeah, that actually sounds really, that sounds right. And I think that is another way I access my higher self, as a
Mm.
way of almost embodying my higher
Yes.
self. Like when we talk about a clearer version, and sometimes if I'm really deep in something, whether it's a project
Mhm.
or like an event or something like that, the singing, but I'm also thinking about like, in undergrad, I did a thesis on masculinity and like evangelical men and stuff like that.
Right.
And one of the things, like how I did it, was I conducted focus groups, and I basically went to like a ton of churches. I did like Southern Baptist and Methodist and the town, and asked like, hey, do y'all have like a men's Bible study that I can come and ask them about masculinity, which is really funny.
Yeah.
Like most of them said
Yeah.
no. Like they were like, no. Because it is like kind of weird. Like this like small girl who looks like she's 12 wants to ask our like grown adult man, like, what
You
does it
still look
mean to
very
be a
young for your
man?
age.
Yeah. Like tell me what does it mean to be a man? Like give me the ins and outs. And so, yeah, a lot of people said no, but I did have something that said yes. And my first one, I was very nervous. I never had conducted focus groups before. And it was actually like, I remember thinking, I pulled up and there were questions before I did this in the department. Like, should she be allow Charlie as a young woman to go into like a place by herself with a group of
Mm.
men who she does not know? Like,
Right.
is this dangerous? And
Yeah.
it was like, no, I can do it. It's not a big deal. So, but however, the first one that I pulled up to the church, and it was a 7 p.m. Bible study in the winter. And so it was already dark.
Mark,
And
yeah.
I had never been to this church, or I didn't know anything about this like place. And I like pull in, and like there's barely any street lights. The parking lot's very dark. And I realized that, oh, like this Bible study is like the only thing happening at this church right now. It wasn't like they were having another service. I'm like, so these men
Mm.
and me are the only people. And I all of a sudden was like, okay, I see what all of my professors were talking about. Like this,
Yeah.
maybe this is, what am I doing? Like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
But I went in there, I sat down, and I got into my flow state. And
Mm.
it was amazing. We had like I got so much good information. Like my advisor was like, they said that when I was telling her some of the stuff. And I remember feeling after, I was like so happy. Like after I did it, it was like the same thing. I can't believe, who was that? Who did that? Like,
Wow.
and I went, like Nate was like going to a bar with his like work friends, because I think they did this, or it was like one of his last days or something. I don't remember.
Mhm.
And I met them there, and I was like just so happy. I had like one margarita, which is all it takes. And I like got so drunk. And there's like these really embarrassing videos. But I was so happy. Like I have to like really be like happy and like in the
Yeah.
mood to like drink
Yeah.
anyway. But I was just like singing Taylor Swift songs, and I was saying, I am so, like, they have video of me going like, I am so cool. Like I'm telling Nam, like, I am so
You
cool.
are.
Like, do you know
Yes.
what I just did? Like, I am so cool. And so anyway, I think that is a way too, if I get really into like a project, and kind of what you were talking about, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think you had said the flow state is like a combination of skill and a combination of like either importance or urgency or something that just needs to
Yeah.
be done.
Challenge. Yeah. Yeah.
Challenge, a
Mhm.
challenge. Yes. That's what that was. Like it was like, yes, I had learned about conducting a focus group, and I had prepared
Mhm.
for it. So I had like skills, although it was my first one. So it was like a huge challenge and it was scary. And I was able to go into it. And I feel like I can do that very well if it's that
Mhm.
type of situation where it's like I have the skill and it feels kind of like a challenge to where like the adrenaline starts. And I
Yeah.
feel like I'm embodying my clearer self. Like I'm, the anxiety's gone, like everything's gone, and I'm able just to like focus, like almost like tunnel vision. And it's like,
Yes.
this is what I'm working on and I can do it. And it's not even a thought. Like once I get into it of like, can I do, I'm just doing it. And I think
Yes.
that is also a way I like kind of access my higher self too.
Absolutely. No, I think that's amazing. And I'm also just wondering, like, people listening in, what their trigger point is to get into that flow state, to like
Yeah.
embody their higher self. Because for you, it was like that project you worked on. And I know for a lot of times for athletes, they'll, be in a game and they'll just be like completely focused. Like, the, it again, it almost feels like you're observing yourself, even though you're
Yeah.
doing it. And it's an amazing feeling. And from the research I've done on the flow state, like, usually when you're in the flow state, like, you have very little error in what you're doing. Like, it's just you're so connected to your intuition in that moment that, like, you're more competent and other people can see and feel that. And I know for myself, though, I was preaching a sermon at a church, and I had that flow state kind of come over me. And I think not only could I feel it, but like other people could feel it too. And I got like the most comments after of like, wow, what you said here really helped me see this or that in a different
Mhm.
light. And even my husband, like, he had come and seen me speak at other things, but he was like, wow, like something was different this time. And
Oh, wow.
that's what I like to study. And I think it's so interesting, like, how to get into that state, where whether you call it the flow state, which, science often calls it that, whether you call it embodying your higher self, whether it is, being in total alignment with your intuition. I don't think it's possible for us to constantly be in that state, because we're human and sometimes you kind of have to step out of that for other
Yeah.
reasons. But I've also found that it comes up sometimes in like really critical moments. Like, this is a kind of a funny thing. I know this has happened to other people in more like serious situations, um, like maybe a big crisis. But I am often like, I have a lot of anxiety. But if I have been in several situations where somebody else has had more anxiety than me, like I was in a car, we were driving to, I think it was DC, me and a friend, and she was driving. And the traffic was awful, and it was nighttime, and the GPS kept messing up, and it kept
Mm.
taking us on this ramp. And it was like, have you seen those like four-leaf clover
Oh,
kind
yeah.
of things, where you're like, you go up the ramp and then back down the ramp? And we just kept going in
Yeah.
circles, and we couldn't figure out where to get off because it thought that we were like on a different part. Anyway,
Oh,
but she was like almost like losing her mind and was just like in a panic, and like this state like came over me. And I was just like, usually I would be so like anxious, but I was just like, this is what we need to do this, do this, do this. And like, I was able, like, it felt like something took over me. There was another time when I was in Uganda, we were visiting this village, and people were showing us their homes, and we were talking about how we could get some education and food to these villages and stuff. And it was it was amazing. Like, these 2-year-old babies are walking around, and they're so agile, and they're like jumping over these creeks, and I'm like, how do you have so much balance? But I walked over this bridge, and it was kind of rickety, and I fell through like one of the slats, and it like caught my leg at my thigh. And so I didn't fall all the way through, but it like caught like this, you have the skinny part of your leg, and then it kind of gets fatter at the top, and it just like stuck. And instead of like freaking out, like this like you're talking, like that flow state came over me, and I'm like, you pull me up, you get off the bridge, take me over here, now lay me down, take that part, we need to look. And I was just like directing this whole madness,
Yeah.
and it was like completely not how I normally react, and it
Uh-huh.
felt that way. And I feel like I can get into that state through meditation too, and like asking
Mm-hmm.
questions of my higher self. But it's also interesting to look at like what things just in everyday life like trigger us to go into that state where
Yeah.
like everything else is kind of pushed out of the way, and you know what to do in that moment, and your intuition is just like hitting like, you take me off the bridge, and you do this, that, and the other.
Yeah. No, I'm the same way because I'm really good in someone else's crisis, but if it's
Yes,
my
yes.
crisis, I'm usually not. Like I probably wouldn't have been in a flow state if it was me falling through the bridge. But like if anybody else is having a crisis, I'm like, oh, I'm like totally relaxed. I'm like, how did I'm usually not relaxed. So,
Right.
but I'm the same way. And I wonder if there is any correlation with like, getting into your flow state or like how connecting with your higher self and like the
Mm.
enneagram or
Ooh,
astrological signs or whatever,
yeah.
because I'm thinking, your one of your examples was, you're just like gonna directly like talk to your higher self, like
Hmm.
you're gonna close your eyes and you're gonna write it
Right.
down and you're gonna directly ask the question. And you're enneagram 8, and enneagram 8s are very like blunt and straightforward, and like
Yeah,
this is
yeah.
what we're gonna we're not beating
Right.
around the
That's a
bush,
good point. Yeah.
and mine, I feel like I get into a lot when I need to like do something like a project or like
Mm.
whatever. And I'm a 3, and the 3 is like the achiever, and that's like I'm gonna do
Yeah.
this. And because you mentioned like the athletes, and I'm like, oh, I think I don't know, there might be a connection there. So I
That's
would
a
be
good
interested to
point.
know people's like enneagram types and how they connect to their higher self, and if it
Right.
seems like it's connected, or like even if you don't do enneagram, like astrological signs or like
Mhm.
human design. um it'd be interesting to see like how that's all connected, because I'm sure it is, like everything's connected.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. No, that's really interesting. I hadn't thought about that before. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I hope people listening, maybe you don't call it your higher self, and that is okay. Like I don't care what the hell you call it. Just like
Mm-hmm.
listen to it
Right.
when that intuition comes over you. I don't care what you call it. If you want to call it your angels or, God or intuition or higher self or something completely different, like I don't care. I don't have a
Yeah.
horse in the race for that. But like, I would be interested how that shows up for you, if you have any stories like that. And I feel like that would fall in our serendipitous story category.
Oh
So
yeah,
if
for
people have
sure.
that, like, please tell us about that.
Yeah, you can like write it if you want to type it out in email or DM us, or you can use the audio like voice message feature on our DMs, which is serendipity.pod, for our Instagram, and you can use that, and then we may be able to use it on the show and play it for everyone.
Right.
Or if you just want to write it out, you can also email us at pod.serendipity@gmail.com. And I never thought about it, but if you also want to take a video of yourself telling it, we can totally, because it's audio too. Like we can put it on our
Yeah,
YouTube, and it'll be on the podcast too. So just like, send us a video if you want, to be on the show.
that would be really awesome. Yeah, I would love to hear those stories. Um, and also, if you enjoyed this episode and you really like listening to these things, it honestly kind of gives us a shot in the arm to keep going, like when we get reviews. And so we've been like giving out a lot of information because we want to kind of like serve the community. But a way you could get back to us is just by like leaving us a review, preferably
Mm-hmm.
5 stars.
Yeah.
Um, and when you do that, if you're leaving it on Apple Podcasts, before you send in the review and hit submit, like after you typed it out, just take a screenshot of it. Because once you hit submit, it kind of goes into the ethers for a few days before we see it and all that. But take a screenshot and then send it to us in our email at pod.serendipity@gmail.com, and we'll send you a free gift. It's a really beautiful serendipity artwork, custom artwork that you can have. And yeah, we'd love to hear what you think about this. And so yeah, thank you all for tuning in. I love this
Yeah,
conversation. It's
this
so
was
fun.
really fun. Yeah, this was really fun. I feel like it's making me reflect a lot, and I want to like reflect more. Because like I said, it wasn't even really till you asked that I was like, oh yeah, like I do talk in the mirror, and I never thought about that. So I'm gonna be reflecting a lot. So yeah, this was really
No
fun.
pun intended.
Right, yeah. Well, thanks for listening, everyone. Daisy and Frankie say bye too.
All right. Bye bye.
Bye.